tells us this isn't the American dream he pictured. I thought it wasn't like that. If I knew this, I would have stayed in my own country. In my country, at least, there was some work, very little, but something. Who tell us that back at home, they are professionals. They went to college and got a degree, yet they find themselves begging for a job here in the United States.
1% of over 26,000. That's how many migrants our sources say have received work permits and Social Security cards in Chicago. It's not clear how many applications have been submitted, though as of December 29th, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services had only processed work permits and temporary protected status applications for 1,480 Chicago new arrivals. Once those applications are processed, they also need to be approved. Sources tell us that only 284 asylum seekers in Chicago have gotten work permits. 279 have received their Social Security card.
Hand out those flyers, but this is the second round, if you will. The city did the same kind of thing at the southern border there in Texas in July. And what the mayor and his top deputies are saying on those flyers, telling migrants, please do not come to New York City because the city is too expensive and you are not guaranteed a hotel room or a place in one of the 200-plus shelters that have been set up to accommodate the migrants and asylum seekers. But that's not entirely true because the city does have a right to shelter law, and that law makes it clear that any homeless person who comes forward asking for help, the city has to provide shelter at no cost to that individual. Meanwhile, again, the city is preparing to launch that canvassing campaign, trying to discourage more migrants from coming here to this city.
Just in this one sector, we found out today that the cartels are making $32 million a week. That's one of 9 sectors, $32 million a week, just trafficking humans. That's not counting the fentanyl that they're pouring into this country. This is a catastrophe that's happening to our country, and it's all on the hands of Mayorkas and Biden. The Immigration and Naturalization Act is very clear. They are to be detained, and parole is only granted on a case-by-case basis in extreme circumstances. Alejandro Mayorkas has turned that on its head, and he has basically, it's catch and release now. 90% of the people who come into this sector right now get released into the country on parole, basically. They're just catch. They want money to process more people into the country. Everything they're doing is to speed people into the United States. The CBP One app is a shell game that just allows people to be processed more quickly into the country.
In Denver, a fire at a migrant encampment is just the latest example of deep challenges faced by communities from coast to coast. The strategy by officials in Arizona and Texas to bus migrants to big cities led by Democrats has accelerated the reality that every state is now a border state.
The situation here and across the country is truly unconscionable.
Denver's mayor says the massive numbers of migrants in his city will cost more than $160 million, or 10% of his city's budget.
Guys, move to the side.
New York City now seeking 20% in budget cuts for, quote, asylum seeker expenses.
Not only is it a financial burden, it has also placed a great strain on the delivery of services in our city.
And in Whitewater, Wisconsin, population 14,000. The police chief and city manager in a letter now begging the Biden administration for more resources and police, writing, our law enforcement staff have responded to a number of serious crimes linked to immigrants in some manner, including the death of an infant child, multiple sexual assaults, and a kidnapping.
Literally hundreds of children in their schools. The current migrants are coming from Nicaragua and Venezuela. Apparently, a number of them speak a different dialect. So the school system has to hire interpreters for their bilingual educators.
The White House slamming House Republicans for refusing to vote for more border funding. And in a brand new lawsuit, the Biden administration is suing the state of Texas over its new law allowing local law enforcement to arrest migrants. The Justice Department arguing it undercuts the ability of the federal government to enforce immigration law.
And in Massachusetts now, they're poised to spend close to $1 billion US on emergency shelters because of migrants.
Just 1 hour, the Lukeville Port of Entry in Arizona will reopen for the first time since it was closed a month ago.
The Port of Entry closing to allow agents to help process a record number of migrants crossing the border. Last month, Customs and Border Protection officials reported that agents encountered more than 300,000 migrants at our southern border.
It's time to come together and do this so these families can do what they want to do. They want to provide for their family. They want to be self-sufficient.
Restaurants and other industries are looking for workers.
These are folks that want to work. Immigrants have always been the backbone of the hospitality industry here in the city of Chicago.
These leaders say it will take President Biden to change the work permit rules.
We understand these people are ready to work, and when they work, they become less of a burden on other people, and they become more independent on their own.
A group of people who came out of Venezuela, all the way from Venezuela, with hopes of a better life. They've been living on the streets. They say, we're going back home. One of them declaring the American dream doesn't exist.
We've got nearly 3,000 living in police stations, 800 living at O'Hare Airport, and thousands more just floating around in between shelter to shelter. And I'm sorry that they don't like our weather. I'm sorry that they feel that we're not doing enough to give them jobs, housing, vehicles, cars, food, shelter, clothing, and everything else that they were promised by social media. But the system works if you do it the right way, and declaring asylum because you need a job isn't the right way, and they're learning that reality the hard way now.
They now call Chicago home. More than 13,000 migrants who've arrived in the past year and been placed in hotels, police stations, and shelters across the city.
Because it's this, look, Texas is ground zero for the invasion, okay? But Staten Island is ground zero for the fix, because it is infiltrating the working, residential, middle-class communities where schools of young children, young girls, pre-K to 12, and they're putting in these young adult males, okay, understand that, who are not vetted.
Many of them are spending tonight outside the Watson Hotel in Hell's Kitchen. It houses mostly single men, but the city plans to convert it into a family shelter, and the men must move out. For the last 36 hours, the city's been trying to take them to the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal. But tonight, there are growing concerns about conditions inside the terminal, with people complaining about a lack of heat and beds. Some city council members say their tour of the facility was abruptly canceled today.
The city telling a group of migrants who slept inside tents on the sidewalk it was time to move to a relief center at the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal. Some of the asylum seekers told me they were moved to the emergency shelter in Red Hook, but came back to the Watson Hotel unsatisfied with the housing at the cruise terminal.
There's only 4 restrooms available for them, 4 individual restrooms, and there's no running hot water.
This is video shot inside the relief center. Another asylum seeker telling me the sleeping cots are set up too close to each other and that it's too cold out there and we have nowhere to safely put our stuff.
And decided to camp out instead of returning to Red Hook because it reminds them of a Hielera, which is an ICE detention center.
Outskirts of Eagle Pass, that group, almost all of them single adults. You can take a look at our drone video we shot earlier this morning to get the full scope of that group. Most of these people are coming in from countries that are not subject to Title 42, including Cuba and Venezuela. That means they will be processed and released into the United States, a majority of them at least. And Border Patrol describes a large group as 100 or more migrants. And in just this Del Rio sector alone, Border Patrol reports they have had more than 50 of these large groups just since October 5th. This was a clash between migrants crossing illegally into the El Paso area and Border Patrol agents. You'll see a large group of migrants, predominantly Venezuelans, crossing the river and entering the El Paso area, one of them carrying a very large Venezuelan flag. Then you're going to see a line of Border Patrol agents respond and push them back into the river. They are armed with paintball guns and they are firing pepper balls at them once they get into the water. Why are they doing that? CBP says one of the migrants assaulted a Border Patrol agent with a flagpole, and another migrant threw a rock at a Border Patrol agent and injured that agent. That is why they had to use those crowd control measures. Look at this video we embedded with the Kinney County Sheriff's Department as they pulled over a speeding vehicle with paper plates. You guessed it. They take a look inside the vehicle. 8 illegal immigrants being smuggled inside by a female U.S. citizen. She was arrested and charged. Enforcement tells us they are starting to see a lot more U.S. citizens getting wrapped up in both drug smuggling and human smuggling as they are sucked in by the offer of quick, easy cash from these smugglers and cartels on social media.
Well, the border has basically, I wouldn't say stabilized, but the numbers remain extremely high. What we didn't see were the 12,000 or 13,000 a day apprehensions that were predicted, but instead you remain at 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 illegal apprehensions per day, and it's just astronomically high. That somehow that is the new normal is crazy. It should not be anywhere close to that high. But what the administration has also done is they basically moved these individuals from between ports of entry, so from the desert to the ports of entry. They're paroling them in. They're using the CBP-1 app. And all of these numbers that they push through at a port of entry no longer shows up on those monthly apprehension charts. And so the administration is claiming victory. There is no victory here. The demand is the same. The numbers are the same. They're just moving them into the country differently and counting them differently as well. Advertise this. You basically said you don't need the cartels. Use the CBP-1 app. But there's also many loopholes, right? If you can't access the CBP-1 app or they take it down, as you just indicated, then you're exempt from many of the rules that bar your entry into the country. And so individuals are showing up at ports of entry saying, I can't access the app. And again, Biden's DHS is letting them into the country under parole, which is not asylum, which provides you no asylum protections whatsoever under U.S. law. So it's a shell game that they're doing at the moment. And I think they're doing that because they know they have this crisis that continues, but they want to be able to say that they're doing something. And these are unlawful paths that they're doing. They're being challenged in court every single day. And we're waiting to see the results of that.
Officials in Philadelphia deporting a confirmed MS-13 gang member who's wanted in El Salvador for murder, Chad. We don't know who's coming in here unless we find that they're a massive terrorists.
Well, we see news like this all the time, and this is what happens when you have unchecked and uncontrolled illegal immigration into the country. When you have 1.5 million gotaways over the last 2 years, you don't know who's there. You don't know if they are a public safety threat, such as an MS-13 gang member. You don't know if they're a national security threat. The idea is that you want to check individuals coming into the country so that you understand who's coming in. And with 1.5 million gotaways, you have no idea who that is. And so you're going to unfortunately, continue to see stories like this throughout the country where an illegal alien is committing some type of crime. And I think it's important to remember, every crime committed by an illegal alien is a preventable crime. It did not need to occur. You need stronger border security laws. You need to enforce those, and you need to bring deterrence and consequence back into the system. It just doesn't exist right now.
Venezuelans fleeing the political and economic crisis there make up the biggest part of this latest wave, followed by Haitians and Ecuadorians. But economic woes, the COVID-19 pandemic, and increasingly extreme weather are pushing more and more people across the region to leave their homes.
We're seeing many migrants fearing a hardening of migration policies with the possibilities of the Republicans in the U.S. So we're seeing an explosion in the south, in Nicaragua, Salvador, Guatemala.
Migrants from as far away as Western Africa and Afghanistan have also started to use this route, with much of the traffic driven by transnational criminal organizations engaged in human smuggling.
Migration's become big business for criminal organizations, at times as big as drug trafficking. The Clan del Golfo Mafia in Colombia has total control over the Darien Gap. We calculate it's $100 million business there alone.
Razor wire, more than 50 migrants over here gathered, some women with small children. And you can see over here along the razor wire, you've got the Texas DPS and the National Guard stopping the migrants from coming through the razor. ¿De dónde eres? You can hear that, Bill. Venezuela, most of them are from Venezuela. And actually here, right at the very close next to the no trespassing city of Eagle Pass, you can see two women stuck in the razor wire here behind me. Hola, ¿cómo te llama? Ana, Ana. ¿Por qué vienes ahora? Opportunity. She says her name is Ana from Venezuela. She says, come Bill, for an opportunity. That's the scene right here.
Okay, it's just like this one here at PS 132. You can see this building is the gym where migrants will be housed. This building is the main school building. They are not attached. And then in the center of it all is a beautiful playground here. But parents just found out that their kids won't even have access to this gated playground. They'll be forced to play on the street for the rest of the school year.
Tonight, a common yet dangerous transport option for migrants heading to the U.S. border shut down. New images from Mexico's largest freight company, Ferromex, showing hundreds of migrants riding freight trains in what the operator calls a social and humanitarian issue. The company taking unprecedented action, announcing it is halting service on 60 different trains, the same train system that has routes to major destinations bordering U.S. cities like El Paso, Eagle Pass, and Nogales, leaving large groups of migrants stranded near the tracks. The company says in the last few days, as many as 1,500 migrants, including families with children, have been riding the trains north, resulting in half a dozen injuries and deaths. This morning, Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador speaking out about the company's service suspension.
No, lo que nos importa no son los trenes, nos importa los migrantes.
It has taken a toll on our local resources, specifically our police force and our fire department. They have had to answer many calls because of this influx of people coming in.
Why is the company deciding to stop the trains now? Tom, the migrants have been using the train for decades. In fact, they've named it the Beast or La Bestia because of the dangers that come from riding that train. The Mexican president was wondering exactly the same thing. Why did they decide to stop services now? So a spokesperson with Ferromex told us that the reason why they're doing it now is because of the unprecedented number of migrants. So essentially they're seeing more migrants than ever before, and that's why they made the decision to stop the trains. Now, Tom, moving forward, we have to see what kind of effects this is going to have on commerce, because these are trains that are bringing products to the United States. So now there's going to be an effect on all of those products that are not making their way to the border.
Asylum seekers in New York City are going door to door looking for help on Staten Island. Just days ago, Mayor Eric Adams declared a state of emergency over the migrant arrivals from the southern border, calling it a manufactured crisis.
Eric Adams says what's happening here in the city is a humanitarian crisis. He also said last Friday that it will cost the city $1 billion to provide housing and social services for the migrants. It's estimated that some 17,000 migrants have arrived here in the city since May. Most of the migrants are now staying at more than 40 hotels spread out across the city, including the ones you see here behind me on Staten Island. Now, according to people who live here in the Travis section of Staten Island, busloads of migrants were dropped people off here at the Staten Island Inn 2 weeks ago, where the city is sponsoring their stay. The people who live here in the community say they were never told the migrants were coming. In recent days, homeowners and business owners claim that some of the migrants have been going door to door looking for clothes or food.
Tonight, more crowds of migrants are being released onto San Diego County streets. Transit stations are being filled with asylum seekers from around the world, some squeezing everything they have into a carry-on bag. The migrants here have been dropped off at a trolley station as part of what's known as a street release. Many I talked to were confused. In fact, this group here asked me if I could call them a cab and get them to the airport. They've come all the way from China. Musa Bashir is from Somalia.
For safe, I'm feeling I'm happy because I come to the land of opportunity where I can change my life.
He tells me he was in detention for 7 days after crossing into the U.S. from Mexico. His light puffer jacket and scarf no match for the extreme cold he will likely feel in just a few months.
I want to go in Minnesota.
You're going to go to Minnesota?
Yeah.
It's cold there. You're going to need a winter jacket.
Oh, yeah,
I'm from Canada, above Minnesota, and it's very cold.
Bashir and many others here seem ill-prepared for what lies ahead. Some, like this man from Colombia, are too scared to show their face.
You're fearing for your life. Yes.
And now 4 migrants that were on one of those buses have been reportedly arrested earlier this month in a big shoplifting bust. Police saying they stole over $12,000 in merchandise from a Macy's at a mall on Long Island, especially one where they see illegal immigrants that are being housed in upscale hotels, for example, around Times Square, being treated much better than the homeless or the incarcerated, both of whom those groups are citizens. Was the interviews with the hotel proprietors and owners who talked about how the food that they served was all going to waste, who talked about and showed photos of the destruction in these hotels that they had to foot the bill for. One that they reported an illegal immigrant got into an altercation, a physical assault of a security guard there. Drug use, more and more and more. These are not just about footing a bill. It's also about having extra costs and extra stress at the behest of the federal government and local.
Were they criminals in their previous countries? And look, the drug cartels are among us now. That jailbreak was real in Juarez. They went north. So the cash that they can get from unloading these goods, is that going to the cartel? Are we looking at like some sort of a cartel hub that could break open in our country?
Just recently was the terror watch list amount of arrests that have been made now at the southern border. Again, not accounting for the 1.2 million gotaways that might have terror watch list members among those. The numbers, to Harris's point, are frightening and they keep growing.
This is what happens when you don't have a southern border, when you don't care about national sovereignty. And President Biden was clear during the campaign before he won election. And then on day one, he basically tore down every single thing that we had done to kind of cobble together some kind of southern border. So nothing that's happening is surprising. And the fact that both Republicans and Democrats aren't taking this seriously also contributes to the problem. But you're absolutely right. We have ceded control of our border to the cartels. And there was just last week in my home county of Tulare County in California, a cartel-style killing probably related to drugs. And, you know, this really does change the way things are happening. You do not want to import from Mexico the type of justice system they have there, where cartels are completely controlling what happens.
Emboldened by our broken immigration system and lack of enforcement, migrants swarm across the southern border, more than 250,000 times in December alone. An estimated 3 to 5 million are believed to have breached the border, with more migrants on the way.
When they make policy statements about immigration priorities and enforcement priorities, they tell the whole world that if you're here in the country illegally, then we're not going to come after you.
Smugglers are also cashing in, helping migrants from more than 165 countries bypass authorities.
Behind me is private land, and Border Patrol recently put up barbed wire up and down this river, but you can see a lot of it is pushed over already. The migrants taking blankets, throwing them across, rendering it essentially useless.
Often leaving their belongings and trash behind. In recent months, data shows the wave is traveling much further to get here. Historically, citizens of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, collectively known as Central America's Northern Triangle, as well as Mexico, have accounted for most illegal immigration. In a dramatic shift, migrants from Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and other countries, once barely represented, are also being processed at unprecedented levels.
Venezuelan, Nicaraguan, and Cuban migrants are not easily able to be returned by the United States because of lack of repatriation agreements with these countries, but also because of diplomatic limitations and restrictions that the U.S. has with these countries.
During our ride on the Rio Grande near McAllen, Texas, we spot a large group of Haitians stranded on the Mexican shoreline as the drug cartel keeps watch from above.
So you think they showed up here without any money to give the final smuggler on the last leg of the journey?
The drug cartels are telling up to cross because they want money.
We ask how long they've been there.
Nosotros quiere cruzar menos para acá legalmente.
con una organización. Son más que 10,000 personas aquí, pero nosotros esperar entrar por Estados Unidos para tener una vida mejor.
In another noticeable change, planes once packed with families are now filled with single men. Still, most of these breadwinners will not be able to legally work here. Meanwhile, from Texas to Arizona,
they're coming because they said that Biden told them to come, that we have an open border.
And D.C. to New York, communities are scrambling for space and resources. Each migrant costs an estimated $9,000 per year for housing, food, medical, and other services. A total of $20+ billion and counting spent since Biden became president. $4 billion more than Donald Trump's border wall. A tally expected to keep climbing as word spreads that the southern border is open for business despite the administration's claims to the contrary.